Day 968 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 675,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,530 in the past day, a truly staggering figure. Then as for hardware losses, 13 tanks, 51 APVs, 23 artillery, and a whopping 93 logistical soft targets. Then headed straight to the map because there were more reports of North Korean soldiers seen at training ranges, this time in the Primorsky Krai region of Russia, all the way over at Vladivostok. This time with an estimated 400 that were seen gathered in parade grounds, but then also another estimated 240 were gathered at another region of Russia, at Khabarovsk. So we see here the initial test bed. The first will get limited training, all as a simple means to identify that they can take orders. Then the rest in the future will be treated no better than your average Russian, just sent off to the front lines to fill the gaps, or perform kamikaze storm assault operations. And with little to no education or training, it's going to be a mixed bag at best. Then at worst, a chaotic disaster, and even a strategic error of international proportions. With events like these unleashing the little known technological military power of the mostly neutral country of South Korea, a country which has been preparing defenses for any potential war with North Korea for the last odd 70 years. Meaning that South Korea's active participation could be very difficult for even Putin himself to call escalatory. After all, if one side gets North Korea, then the other side becomes privy to the assistance from South Korea. Then we'll head into Ukraine. We'll start out in the Donbas today. The Pokrovsk direction, where Russian encirclement tactics are, not strictly speaking, encirclements, because this here in the south is one of the most prolonged encirclement campaigns I've seen launched by the Russian army on the map. Most recently, we can see here we've had the Russian forces look to perform a branch out from the north, then it also appears as the same from the south, although with those land and river beds, that position is disconnected from the north. So ultimately, for the AFU, it comes down to maintaining access to their logistical lines to the west in order to supply, resupply, and if or when it becomes necessary, pull back to safer positions. Then as for the north of here, closer to Pokrovsk itself, with an almost total lack of changes seen here on the map, which makes it feel like the following conditions as seen in this video. Now, this recent footage upload was published showing the mud season arriving somewhere in the eastern Donbas, though it didn't specify where. However, it won't be long before everywhere it looks like this. Then we head all the way up north to Kursk, to the collapse of the Ukrainian incursion, as the Russian media would have you believe. However, the location's been otherwise quite stable. Although what's not been stable is the level of how intact Russian hardware in the region has been. Because take for instance, we most recently saw a pair of Russian BMPs get destroyed from FPV drone hits. Further to that, we saw a destroyed Akhmat MRAP and another BMP. That one was in the Lyubimovka area. Then we saw much the same with an old Soviet-Russian 1960s engineering vehicle and some sort of buggy as well. But then, just 60 minutes ago, a Russian APC takes a direct hit from a Ukrainian tank, also in the Kursk region. But beyond all that, most astonishingly would be how Russia, frustrated after months of attempts to oust the Ukrainian army from the Kursk region with military means, has now more and more reverted to their standard tactics of destroying towns with their aerial glide munitions and artillery. Except this time, it is of course their own towns. Not a lot of precision tactics to be found in the playbook of the world's second army. Then we'll head on all the way down the map, as a missile threat has been reported in Crimea, leading to the closing of the Crimean Bridge, the Kursk Bridge, where we saw a smoke screen over the bridge deployed, but noting that the actual site of the explosions reported within Crimea was some 170 kilometers away in Jankoy. Russia has such a high priority on keeping this bridge intact because they know, really Putin knows, he cannot stand the embarrassment of its destruction, thereby using all means necessary to keep it afloat. Meanwhile, due to the constant closures of the bridge and the limited traffic and the very limited rail traffic crossing the bridge, then functionally speaking, many days of the week it's as good as destroyed anyway, as the bridge has never since reached a fraction of the maximum utility once granted to it after its very initial targeting by the AFU some time ago. Then taking a look around the map, because somewhere in the east, where I sometimes like to display the weird, the wacky, the wonderful, but sometimes also the waste of time and resources, as this time we saw the Russians start using dummies once again, in an attempt to trick Ukrainian UAV pilots and waste artillery shells. This sleepy chap even gets himself a gas mask. But also notice the background, it's quite a bit built up. These are of course by no means frontline trench positions. It's somewhere in the rear, likely housing a commander of relative importance or stature, who, through his paranoid mindset, attempts to set up the position such that the first strike wouldn't rain down upon him. Also note, Ukrainian recon drone operators have some experience seeing dummies in the field, where they've pretty much just flown past the decoys. Meanwhile, half the Russian soldiers on the front lines aren't even clothed this well, and would kill for this level of gear. That's right, the dummies are better dressed than the Russian troops. In fact, my military blunder segment coincidentally speaks to that end in just a moment. Then also in the east, we see an interesting video of the interception of the Russian Zala reconnaissance drone. It seems in this case the AFU's interception drone's warhead did not detonate, but the FPV grappled with the Zala and they fell to the ground together. So, mission accomplished? Then also in the east, but as a change of pace, we still see the activists of Ukraine's Yellow Ribbon movement continue to resist in the occupied territories. This time we're reminded of their fight in Donetsk, but also in Simferopol and Yatla of Crimea. Some of these stickers read, "Crimea is Ukraine" and "Glory to Ukraine." Then headed across to some news for today. So Ukraine and Greece have solidified their security cooperation with the signing of a bilateral security agreement. This agreement, one of the now 25 Ukraine has signed with various countries around the world like the US, the UK, France, Norway, Denmark, Spain, Canada, Finland, and many others, aims to bolster Kyiv's defenses against Russian aggression. And so for this latest signing, Greece has pledged to accelerate the training of Ukrainian pilots and technicians for F-16 aircraft. Then, speaking of F-16s, Norway will soon transfer 6 F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine, marking the first batch of the pledged jets, though the exact numbers beyond this initial 6 have not yet been detailed. Now, just prior to this, the Netherlands was the latest country to deliver F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine on October 7, which also happened to be Vladimir Putin's birthday, where the Netherlands sent an undisclosed first batch out of a total of 24 pledged. Then before that, Denmark was the first to deliver back in August, sending the first 6 out of a total of 19 pledged by the country. Then headed across to another Russian military mobilization blunder segment, as Russian Z propagandist Maxim Kalishnikov complains that the Russian Ministry of Defense cannot organize the supply of even the most basic needs of the personnel within the Russian army. As one example, he visited a village under Russian control where the soldiers at that position begged Kalishnikov for help for warm clothes and socks for the upcoming winter. When he asked them, "Where's the administrative commander?" they bitterly smiled and said, "In the rear." Another story that Kalishnikov mentioned was that there was a Russian soldier reassigned here from the Donbas, where he is now officially listed as gone AWOL in the Donbas. The whole thing is just a mess. And so Kalishnikov makes this video requesting that the Russian MOD straighten all of this out. Oh, they'll straighten it out, alright. But not by changing the systemically flawed underpinnings of the entirely corrupt Russian military. Instead, as per usual, they'll either silence this Z propagandist or make him post another update later, something to the effect of, "Oh, I apologize for the previous video log. The situation I described was an isolated, acute scenario or incident, and all personnel within the armed forces of Russia are getting equipped at least up to 3 times as well as the standard of any NATO soldier." And all of that sounds like a joke, right? But there's been dozens of these videos already. What a mafia state Russia is. Then headed to a super quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. So, the world's superpower of Russia continues to produce cars like this in the year 2024. Poor welding everywhere, gaps for no reason at all. And yes, spots of rust from right out of the factory. But perhaps the worst part, almost 20,000 US dollars, which is especially a lot given Russia's GDP per capita and average wages that both sit on around 10 to 12,000 USD per annum. And so by this stage now, there's been countless reports of Russian automotive manufacturers really just dropping the ball on quality. But that's what a labour workforce shortage of 5 million people will do, which is only exacerbated by crippling economic sanctions. What a society in decline. Higher prices, lower quality. The Russian direction of the 21st century, evolving just backwards. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, all of those wonderful things. I appreciate it so much. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!